Making no sense with Tom Sena.
Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Making No Sense. That's right, I've officially named it. It's kind of an homage to my old cable access talk show that I used to do on Cox Cable, Omaha, Nebraska. I'll talk about that on another podcast, and I'll show you, and so you'll figure out what that is. But so the name is, that's what you need to know, is that it's now called Making No Sense. That's what we're watching. So my guest today is crazy that he's doing this show. He's crazy that he's doing my podcast. He's doing it for no other reason than out of the kindness of his heart. That's the kind of guy this is. He's an Omaha. He's one of Omaha's favorite sons for sure. He became quite a name. He made quite a name for himself coming out of Burke High School in the area here, doing magic and comedy. He is comedy gold. He then went out to LA, and guess where he ended up? One of the original writers on a little show you may have heard of called Seinfeld. That's right. He became a writer on Seinfeld for years. Went on from there. He's toured stand-up with Jerry Seinfeld. He's he created his own sitcom, which now can actually be seen. He's airing some of those episodes on his own social media, but we'll get into that. He also has done a lot of other things. He's written for stage. He's in the process of maybe writing a book even, I think, right now. But he has his own podcast. He now lives in Austin, Texas, and he has his own podcast called Creativity in Captivity. And we talk about that. I actually already did the podcast, and I was so excited to talk to him when I was listing off his credits, his introduction. I kept on stopping and talking about all of them. And so it ended up being like an hour and a half introduction, which he calls me out on and makes fun of me for, which I deserve. So that's why I decided to go back and give him a proper introduction. So we'll talk about all of that stuff and many more. And there's so much stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about. But ladies and gentlemen, I bring you comedy gold from right here in good old Omaha, Nebraska. Pat Hazell. Pat Hazell is an Omaha icon in the world of entertainment. He's one of Omaha's favorite sons. I kind of became aware of Pat because of my older brothers and sisters had gone to school with him at Burke High, which we're going to get to that. Let's just kind of go through the list real quick. Let's just do the whole, just to kind of catch people up, because I like the idea of this, if, the tens of people that will see this, that they will be,
by the way, of which one will know who I am.
So, well, that's exactly why I want to do this. That's why.
No numbers.
Because people, I don't think people realize, what a guy you are. So you have a podcast, Creativity in Captivity. Is that it?
Yeah.
There it is. And you're doing that. Is that weekly, or are you just doing it ad hoc, or how's that work?
No, we drop one every Thursday, 50 weeks of the year. So the way we do it is 25 episodes in a season. Then we take 1 week hiatus, then another 25. So we do 2 seasons in a year. So we get 2 Thursdays off.
Perfect. That's what I aspire to someday. That's awesome. So what are you doing with that podcast? Is it, just tell me a little bit about it.
All right. Well, I built an amazing, unintended creative network of people, because we talk to people about the creative process and what they do. And it ranges from comics and writers and producers and directors and what have you, everything from visual artists to dinosaur sculptors to ventriloquists. And by having different disciplines, we find that a choreographer might relate to the same problems that a Broadway producer does. And there's a lot of crossover in subjects when people talk about, imposter syndrome or fear of the blank page or, writer's block or whatever. All of that stuff is kind of shows up. And I find that our listeners are very much like our guests, which is creative people. As you know, Tom, you're doing a lot of creative stuff. Sometimes you're just at home alone with no water cooler to go to. So the stories don't get shared and that sort of a thing. And I felt like this was a kind of a listening library for anybody who wanted to be in a creative arts area. They could go through and go, I'll just listen to the comedians or the songwriters or the directors, and I can get a little education out of that. But also, I just accidentally now know everybody at the top of every field. Photographers, I just talked to a guy in London that is co-writes these Darren Brown magic and mentalism shows. but he's the lead and the producers on the West End. And it was a fabulous conversation. So the pandemic introduced us to this, play dates for other adults, which you and I are having now.
That's
and
the captivity part, I take it.
Well, it started at that time, but it's funny. I had started the concept kind of just before, and the notion was that we would hold a creative person captive for an hour and we would examine them and then we'd release them back into the wild. But we didn't have the show come on until everybody was sheltering in place, and they assumed that the captivity they were under duress. But
gotcha.
Anyway, it had a good little musical rhythm to it, so we kept it.
It's great. So now that hopefully that's piqued your interest on how did this guy accumulate this, this network of creativity, of creative people. Let me just go down the list real quick. Just let me Wikipedia you here. So Pat's from Omaha. He was it 86 that you moved out there, or were you out there already a little earlier than that?
No, I can't remember exactly, but it was
LA.
I moved to LA from Omaha to start stand-up comedy and to work at places like the Magic Castle and all that sort of stuff.
So Pat already had already made a name for himself, and that's the part I do want to get. I want to get to that because that's a part that I think a lot of these. I'm assuming you've answered these podcast questions ad nauseum. So I mean, and we'll definitely touch on those, but I'm going to bring it back to Omaha because that's where I am, and that's how I got to know you. But so Pat made a name for himself in Omaha, doing comedy, starting at Burke, and going on from there. And I want to get to some specific things that I know about what you did here, but let's click down the list. Pat moved out to LA, ended up being, and I'm sure that there's a big story behind this, and I want to know a little bit about that. Ends up being the original, I think, on the original writing team for Seinfeld.
Yeah, I did not write on the pilot, but I was one of the first writers hired when they went to series.
Right. All right, and we'll get to that.
And side note, they never show that pilot because Elaine wasn't in it, and there was a different woman that sadly didn't go on with the show further. But
gotcha.
That got the ball rolling.
I didn't realize that. I had heard that someone else had been cast. I didn't realize she actually made the pilot a whole different Elaine. Or did they not even have a woman?
Well, they had a woman,
okay.
And she worked in the diner, and but her name was not Elaine. Okay. It was something. So one of the things that my partner and I got assigned was to introduce Elaine in an episode we called The Platonic Bomb, which was just the idea that you might have a platonic friend that could go off on you sometime and want to become your girlfriend.
Yeah, that is fraught with dynamite. All right. And Pat went on now, and there's probably a lot in between here, but you went on to create your own series that was piloted. Was it ever picked up, or because you made 6 episodes of American Pie, this sitcom.
It was done with NBC Productions, which was sort of the production arm of NBC, but it didn't guarantee it to go on NBC. They were looking at it and they knew about it and they would come to the tapings. It kind of it fell in the cracks of when one main executive leaves the network and a new one comes in. Mm-hmm. And so it was championed by the previous guy named Warren Littlefield, and the new guy didn't want the old guy stuff. So it was like, oh, if it's a hit, he'll get credit for it. And if it's a bomb, I'll get blamed for it, right? So it's a classic kind of, trap for creative folks when it takes you a while to develop something.
Well, it's awful. So for anyone that is not familiar with this or whatever, Pat, you're putting them out on Facebook. Is that what I'm seeing?
I just did it before the holidays because I was, first of all, I wanted to see whether, it was so long ago we made it, mm-hmm. and there were so many cast members and guests that have gone on to successful things. And, we really enjoyed writing these 6 episodes and kind of standing by. And we did get a point where they were talking about when they were going to put it on, and we were going to go to the upfronts, which is a thing where they announced the shows. And then somehow that got delayed, and we were going to go on mid-season. So we waited. In the meantime, NBC liked all the elements. They started to pick things like cast members out of our show and put them into other shows. And I could feel us being like slowly dismantled for the parts,
Right.
But unfortunately, because I wore the hat of a creator, a producer, a star, like I had to stay with the show. Like my contract wouldn't let me go do other shows. So anyway, in the meantime, we come to this time of year and people are binge watching. It's a whole different behavior. And I thought, oh, it might be fun to throw one up and see if people enjoy it. And many people were writing me private messages. Is there more than this? Can you? I go, well, there's 6 of them. I don't care. Like, it's not, nobody makes money or loses money or anything. It's just, now I'm writing the people who wrote with me and people who started it and say, hey, you probably never saw this, but here it is. So, it's public service.
Do you own those?
Well, I was a co-creator of it.
Right.
And I would say that at this point, they were so deeply buried in the NBC vaults. If they weren't at the network, so they would have been at the production company. And even many of those people, look, we're old people now. We've definitely lost some of the people who were, championing it at the time and that sort of thing. So I don't know what the legality is, but I'm here to say that they could ask me politely to take them down.
Right. Which, I mean, but I mean, I can't stress to you enough. I mean, these are, and I don't know, I guess this will be a follow-up question about, is this a process that they even do today still to this extent? But I mean, Pat has 6 full episodes. I mean, it's not like this was a rough pilot or these are full, recorded in front of a live audience.
Yeah, no, everything was, the process was fantastic. We worked with a hairdresser from Friends and the set designer from Seinfeld, and everybody had a great job, and they came together with us to shoot these 6 episodes, and we had a good thing to show for ourselves. But again, we're very, very proud of the work, and it just has never been enjoyed. And it's family fare. So, for the most part, it's meant to be on broadcast television, which means we don't have to really apologize for the content because it fits the standards of today's television. Well, it's squeakier than that, I guess. But, there were some super cool people involved. And I just felt blessed that they were willing to, sign up to join us on the adventure,
Well,
I think there's probably hundreds and hundreds of TV pilots and short orders of episodes that never get seen. They come and go. Like, my understanding is that George Clooney had, something like 13 television pilots before he was on, ER. And in fact, one of those was a sitcom called ER. There was a different concept. You know what I mean? It wasn't even the same people, but that's where you get your practice in,
Do those normally just get one pilot though? Or, I mean, cause you guys had 6
a lot of times.
episodes.
Yeah. No, they often get a pilot. Our pilot was well received, and they picked it up for 6 episodes, and I think they had a mission to put it on. The weirdest thing, and this is fun for the Omaha and Nebraska folks, is that we decided to set it in Nebraska for the Family Garden Center and all of that.
Right.
So there's lots of locations that are hilarious that people, I started at the Spaghetti Works down in the Old Market. This took place right across the street. We turned something there, a fruit stand or something, into a garden center for our exteriors. There was a loft apartment above it that had an arched window that I always used to see coming out of the Spaghetti Works. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to live up there? So we just put the brothers living in that apartment and working at the garden center below.
Did you just get exteriors of that? Or did you actually get any?
I think we were allowed to go in and shoot the interior so that our designers could match the look of the apartment, not the furniture and stuff, but they wanted to be sure that the archway and the bricks and everything kind of would match.
Oh, sure.
And we had a guy named Jamie Vasey, who was a Nebraska guy that was our location scout. And I would say, hey, can you get me Ross's Steakhouse exterior? Can you get me whatever? We had there was a place called Stoisage Sausage.
Yeah.
Sausages in like West O that we just loved the name of it, and we liked how it looked, and it had that funny sausage icon. But we made that the pancake house that we would go to. Our characters would go there for a pancake eating contest or something. It was fun, and those kinds of little, I wouldn't even call them Easter eggs, but just sort of those Valentines back to Omaha were part of my many, many days in the Old Market.
Well, all the more reason for people, if you're anyone that I know that happens to be catching this, I mean, I would say definitely go out. Where are you publicly putting out, where can you find this? Or is it just something that you're sharing with friends?
Well, they would have to go to my Facebook page, essentially. Yeah. And so if they go there and drop a note that says, be my friend or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not too particular. I don't know when my ceiling, I think I'm in the 4,700 followers kind of area, like at 5,000, they stop you. So, if if 10 people are seeing this, they will all be able to watch them.
Would you consider putting it on YouTube?
Maybe. I mean, I do a little research with somebody to see what the legality is of that, but I mean, they would probably live there a long time. Given the way people began to watch short orders of television, like I just watched an amazing Rowan Atkinson little thing that was got a holiday theme to it called Man versus Baby, I think. Very fun. I mean,
my kids
like full of laughs and whatever. But it's a fun watch. And, especially right now before the holidays, it's got a seasonal theme within it. And that's only 4 episodes. By standards of Faulty Towers or something, 6 episodes is a lot.
Yeah, you're right. No, I was going to say, that's like, I mean, nowadays, that's half a season. You already had finished there. Funny note about Mr. Bean. My 3-year-old is watching he has an animated show. That's his character. Oh, yeah. And it's on YouTube and it's adorable. And it's all, it's all his regular shtick. But I came up on that. I'm like, you're watching Mr. Bean?
That just shows you how I like 3-year-old comedy. That gives you an idea of mine.
Well, you can't find a more honest critic than that. So that was another, that took a lot of your time, a lot of efforts out there. Incidentally, I don't know if you've seen this, but IMDb has it listed. If you look up American Pie, you got to get through all the movie American Pie stuff. Yeah. But you find and the only thing it says is there's a description that says a group of Americans eat a lot of pie. That's it.
Well, that's very funny. But that isn't, I don't believe we eat pie in any episode.
I was going to say, from what I know,
there was a screening, Tom. You may not be aware of this. When it was about to come out and when we were going to go to New York to announce and all of that, I wanted the cast to see the episodes together. And we went back to Omaha, and I want to say that we went to the movies on Q, Cinema Q or something.
Was it the Cinema Center, wasn't it?
Cinema Center.
Yes.
Okay. But they showed all 6 episodes and I think it might have been a fundraiser, but we showed 3 episodes. We took an intermission. We guys from Bacon. And then we went back in and watched the others. And it was a blast. The audience, for us, we hadn't heard anybody laugh at the material. Yeah. And so that's like payday for the writers, for the actors, and everyone else. And that's really fun to do because many times when you make television, you don't know if it's working or not working. You just don't know. But by having a public showing, we really got to have fun with that.
Well, the first time I heard mention that, because I'm friends with you on Facebook and I was following along and I happened to see some mention of that. And I saw, I think you were just putting out clips at first. And I was like, what? I was like, what is this? And I'm sure with a lot of other people that we're looking at, but I started watching them and it's just like this absolute, you're being modest already. This is a show that absolutely stands toe to toe with anything that was on TV at that time. Absolutely. And Pat was the lead in this, comedy, in this sitcom. And you were great.
Yeah, it was an ensemble show.
I know it was, but you were absolutely the lead. Pat.
I know, but I got to be me, and everybody else had to play a character. You know what I mean?
Well, that sounds familiar. That's kind of what Seinfeld did. It totally works on those same all of that same stuff. It absolutely stands toe to toe with any of that stuff. And that's why I think it's just crazy that just sucks that did not get picked up in a real way.
It does. Yeah.
But so it goes. I'm sure, that's a Hollywood story.
Well, I thank you for the compliment. Yes, it is. And it happens to movies. It happens to all kinds of things. And the amount, I would say, I know, but I like the work, the creative process, the doing of the work, the making something original, the working with other people, the collaborative process. Being able to have a theme song written. There was a musician named Steve Ferris, and Steve was part of Mr. Mister. He came from Fremont, Nebraska. And it was right around the time that I was getting ready to put a theme song on that I was flying back for the holidays to Nebraska, and he was on the same flight. And I said, hey, we're just taking submissions for this theme, and I want it to be musical. I don't want it to be a cloying TV theme. So I would like a real musician to make something that, that the musicality of it could be on the radio if it needed to be. Like just sort of direction of not making it a kind of a jingle-y thing, And we had several submissions from really good people, and they varied, but most of them were writing kind of kitschy TV themey things. and he wrote some really interesting music that I liked. But he was very clever in that he didn't put the lyrics. He just had a scat singer, going da 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 da, whatever, so that we weren't committed. We didn't sync the song off the words not being right.
Right.
So we liked the music well enough that he said, "You guys know what this is about. Why don't you help me write the lyrics?" So Matt Goldman, who was my co-creator, we worked with Steve to tell a story in that lyric. He, of course, sure that it's right and so forth. But I remember going to the studio to watch him record it, and they were like big, heavy hitters. I didn't hire the band; he hired the band. So,
was this already? Had he already had Mr. Fame?
Yes,
by the time
it was after that. He had also been a music director on a lot of Anheuser-Busch commercials and all of that kind of stuff. But I think Leland Sklar was the bass player.
Oh man,
who was the bass player on like sessions of everybody's music and
absolutely.
Yeah, which is now we're Facebook friends, so something came out of it.
Right on. That's awesome. Yeah, he's.
But even that, the naming of the show, it was not called American Pie. This was based on a play that I wrote called Bunk Bed Brothers that was produced at the Omaha Playhouse way back then.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it was just two brothers and a dad in the story. And it went through a little bit of a, evolution and, purpose, the sort of, I guess, the relationship of the brothers. And then it was, after it was produced in LA as a play, it became it was optional.
Hold on. You're breaking up a little bit.
So it's been like a lot of things before it got to NBC. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, I can't.
But that's how it goes. You do that.
Again, you probably put together 100 people from just that show alone that you've met and probably run across their paths and everything. So you go on to now. I don't know, timeline wise how this all plays out, but you have a comedy album out, Pat and Mike. Is that true?
I do. That was not too long ago. It's called Pat and Mike Live, and Mike is spelled M-I-C, so it's for microphone.
Gotcha.
It's me with a microphone, basically.
All right.
So that actually, I came back to Omaha and I shot that at the Benson Theater. I didn't shoot it as a special. I just recorded it as an album.
Oh, okay.
But that's on Spotify. People can, and again, I make stuff to make stuff.
Mm-hmm. I may have seen that.
I wish I was.
I know I went to one of those Benson shows.
Yeah, I think so.
Very cool.
I mean, I do that kind of stuff because I feel like I want the material to have a bigger life. I mean, it's not like I am concerned about a big legacy, but you do that in a club and 200 people see you, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you do that every night of your life, and you put out an album and it goes on Spotify, and 1 million people can hear it.
Right. Well, and you can always refer back to
nice way to get it. Yeah.
That's awesome. You also did the Wonder Bread years. Now, tell me a little about this. This went on PBS. It was a one-man show.
Yeah.
Where was this? Where did you do this?
Very interesting. I had the Bunk Bed Brothers success, that play, and I realized that I was going to have trouble booking this play around the country because I had to rely on the other cast members. And sometimes people would say, "Can you do this show a year from next May?" And they'd go, "I don't know what I'm going to be doing." Like nobody was willing to take a booking a year out. They were afraid they might be doing something else.
Right.
So I had to write a new and read. The name is a parody of the Wonder Years, which also took its name from the product. The Wonder Bread years were like the formative years of people growing up. So these were your, grilled cheese and tomato soup years, right? So I was writing a lot about throwback years, what we were doing, a coming of age, your worst Halloween costume, your, recycling your Christmas gifts, your riding in the back of the country square wagon. So I had all this content, and I just thought that the title would let people know this is going to be a nostalgic trip, down memory lane. And I started doing it. I just was four-walling theaters around the country for a while. And then when it was ready to be a special, I brought it to NETV, which was in Lincoln, and I shot it for their PBS affiliate, and they used it as a fundraising, like a pledge drive thing. And I thought, if I did that, I would be done with it. Like that felt like what you do is you make it into TV and then you do something else. And the theater said, "What are you going to do? You should do this at some of these other theaters around the country. And I go, I don't know how to reach those people. And they said, well, go to the Arts Midwest Conference in Paul, Minnesota. That year was a very interesting year because these people fight over these showcase slots to show, let's say, 18 minutes of your material, hoping that theaters will like want to see more, right? And that was around 9/11. So I had gotten an alternative spot, and somebody said, you're not going to get any stage time. Nobody gives up the spot. Well, when 9/11 happened, there were lots of people who didn't want to fly, who didn't want to go to St. Paul. They called me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing 18 minutes of your show? And I was like, okay, and I put it on, and, they said, these don't expect to get bookings because that's not how this works. And I was like, oh, I thought that's why we were here. They go, no, they might look at it this year and finish their season, and then next year they might talk about it. And then, it's just a long, slow turning ship in the ocean.
Yeah.
But because of 9/11, the Wonder Bread years was like comfort food. And they were changing programming. They were like, we better not do Death of a Salesman this year.
Right.
There was a show called Win. It was about a cancer struggle. And they were like, ooh, I don't know if people will sit still for this. So I started picking up dates for that following fall, replacing shows. And it was sent to Dayton, Ohio for 3 weeks and different places. So that I've been doing that show, among other things, for over 25 years,
So
where I run
were
out and
you
do
going
one
to those different places doing the show live?
I was.
Oh, okay.
I was doing it live. And what was interesting was when you do a show like that, and it seems really personal, it's your stories about growing up or whatever, you kind of have to be present to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then the height of it, which was pre-pandemic, but at the height of it, Wonder Bread years as a show was popular enough for bookings that I couldn't do all the shows. Like they wanted shows on the same night I had shows. And I said, well, I'm in the middle of a run. I can't do that. And they go, well, could we cast somebody in Minneapolis to do it? I go, oh, I never thought of that, right? So we had a guy named David Mann, played the Chanhassen Dinner Theater for 13 months. He did 7 shows a week.
He did you.
Yeah, well, he didn't do me. I customized the writing to David. I went through David's family pictures. Like people didn't know what I had anything to do with
like
it.
rewrite,
right? And there was a guy named John McGivern in Milwaukee, and John McGivern was a civic treasure with all kinds of one-man shows, and we customized it to him, right? So there was an actor named John Mueller who did it for a while, and there was at its apex, there were 4 or 5 people doing it, not all year round, but on a really hot Saturday night, I could say there are 4 Wonder Breads going on in the country. But it did teach me something about how to multiply the value of the show. Not really licensing it to people, because we kind of managed the producing and the directing of it, but we wanted it to be consistent and the experience to be similar. So if people saw it, it felt the same way to other people. But it folded into these other. I wrote a show called A Kodachrome Christmas once for a theater in Pittsburgh, and they essentially did the first one, and it was a one-woman show, which was a bit of a Tom Sawyer move on my part, so I wouldn't have to be in it. I was like, if I write it about a woman, they can't ask me to do it. But within a few years, both men and women were doing the role. There was, these other actors, the guy I just mentioned, John McGivern, he did it as a woman, kind of like Mrs. Doubtfire or, one of those kinds of characters. And it wasn't really like a drag show. It was, how women own Christmas, essentially. And he was hilarious. So his community thought that was the only show to, it was like going to Christmas Carol or Santaland Diaries or Nutcracker every year. He did that, I would say, 7 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it was a big hit in Milwaukee and all the satellite cities around it.
Awesome. How wild. That you would write it, kind of rewrite it to tailor to the specific people and their own, and like autobiographically, like their own reflections on their. No, that's not completely fair. But I would customize the parts, like the family slideshow, the stuff where you needed to see that the narrator and the people in the picture were the same. Sure.
So I would say I personalized it.
Okay.
But when I did the Kodachrome Christmas, I would rewrite it for the region. So in certain things that you say, like people say soda or pop or Coke, I would change it so that they thought it was homegrown, right?
Gotcha.
And it was better to say Oleo in Milwaukee than it was to say butter. You know what I mean? Like there were certain things that people were like, hey, they're talking to us here, right? And in my Wonder Bread Years act, everywhere I would go in the country, people had a different saying for if your zipper was down, right?
Right.
And you wanted to put it up. So, I grew up with, your barn door's open, right?
Gotcha.
But in Pittsburgh, there was saying steel is down 100%, right? Which meant the zipper was on the bottom. And somewhere else it
Fitting
was
for
like,
Pittsburgh.
yeah, do you have a license to sell hot dogs? It was one of them in Chicago or something, right? So I started collecting them all because
I remember
they made me-
XYZ PDQ.
Yes,
No
which stood
idea.
for examine your zipper pretty damn quick. That's what that stood
Well,
for.
there you go.
And there was one, are your shoes having a party? Has your zipper been invited down?
Gotcha. I'm sure there's a
So
million.
anyway, that I learned a lot about regional touring because it made a difference. And also generationally, I found jokes worked for people of a baby boomer age. If I said, my milk money was a nickel, they connected.
Yeah.
But a younger person would say, well, that's crazy. It was a quarter. And they wouldn't even listen to the joke because the facts weren't right for them. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Kind of alienate different audiences. Well, that's wild. I mean, and that was all live stuff. Did all these different regional theaters, did they make recordings of these things at all? Or or did you ever do you did something that, was it just your first original one that ended up on PBS or?
Well, that one, yes. Other actors, I know in Milwaukee we shot Wonder Bread Years, and I know we shot A Coat of Chrome Christmas, because that actor, we did license him a DVD merch thing where he could sell them over the holidays, and people could, he was a PBS star and had done several television series. So it was a robust, stocking stuffer to get a DVD. But now, I don't think we've put any of that, too much of that stuff up on YouTube yet, but there is content around. It's if you have a DVD in the lobby, they don't have a DVD player at home. They don't even know what to do with it, right?
No, it's all everything's
so
streamed.
it's kind of a waste to do that. They'll come up to me and they'll say, I should buy this for my grandma's, old folks home, right? That's the place they know where a DVD goes,
Right. But you would need to have a Pat Hazell. You probably do. YouTube channel and just start putting some of the stuff out there so it just lives. That's, if for nothing else.
Well, listen, I can tell you this, there are things you don't want to live.
Well, sure.
When Facebook came along, all the idiots I knew in high school had pictures of you doing stupid things and they'd start posting them. And I was like, whoa, that was a high school thing. I don't need to see that again,
Well, all right.
Once it's on the internet, you can't stop it.
Speaking of that, I saw, now this was an old story, and I think I probably saw the original World Herald article when it happened, but I'm sure this is high on your list of stuff that you get asked about, but you did. So this was back before you went out to LA, as far as I know. You were still local Omaha guy, magic, comedy. You did a reenactment of Harry Houdini's famous, escape artist trick, hanging upside down in a straitjacket, and they hung you over the intersection of 11th and Howard Street, right?
That's right. Yeah, I did. Over the brick streets there.
Thank God there is a photo of this, and if I get a chance if I end up editing this the way I think I might do it, I'll sink it in about right here, just so that you could look at the young Pat Hazell in
I tell you what,
phenomenal shape, by the way.
There's some crazy pictures from that one day and one time only.
Well, thank God.
And it fell on Halloween, which was the anniversary of Houdini's death. It was the 56th anniversary of Houdini's death. And we found some footage of Houdini doing the inverted straitjacket escape down by the Orpheum Theater in that same area. And so, the idea was really just to put on a show.
Yeah.
So we did a street show and we did magic tricks, and there was a juggler, and Luigi Waits was out there on the drum set backing us up with drum rolls and all that stuff. So I know as a musician,
Sure.
Luigi. So we did that, and we had no idea what we were doing. I had not ever escaped from a straitjacket.
What?
I started rehearsing about 3 weeks before, and then I put up a few posters, and we didn't know, and there were 3,000 people in the old market under the streets looking up, and again, dangling from this cord right across from that arch window that I talked about, between the Spaghetti Works and that building, and there's so many moments in my life that corner came into play. I used to street perform at in front of the Nouvelle Eve women's store over there, where there was a nice kind of area you could put a hat out. Yeah. And M's for, a dinner date or some lavash or whatever they were selling food wise. Like, so when it came time to pick a place for the sitcom, I was like, I'd be comfortable with a character here, you know?
Yeah.
So
No,
I don't know.
I caught
So
those. I
that's
caught
the
those little
fantasies.
iconic places in your show, in the sitcom. It's awesome to see that. I was just like watching. I was just, oh wait a minute, and like in the opening run, the credits and all that stuff, they show these flashes of Omaha, and then even during the thing, like you say, even during the show,
They show the Roberts Dairy Cow, right?
Yeah.
The Roberts Dairy Cow is going down the street on a trailer or something.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we planned that. I think we just caught it on one of our, B-roll shooting days. And
Yeah.
I was like, that has to be it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you also, okay, so getting back to the whole Seinfeld thing, how does that?
Is this still the introduction, by the way? Is
Yeah.
this the introduction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to get to the meat and potatoes in just a minute. Your Seinfeld run, how does that, had you written for other TV shows up until that point?
No idea. Never done that. And very weird. I'm a long ticket that came along. I had written the play Bunk Bed Brothers with my comedy guy, Matt Goldman. He was another comedian. We both wrote this play to kind of getting out of writing something on our own. A theater in Minneapolis had invited Matt to do a one-man show. They invited me to do a one-man show. We were introduced at like a Super Bowl party in LA or something. And I said, oh, that's funny. They asked me to do that. And I go, wouldn't it be easier if we wrote something together and just went and did it? And like, we were both trying to get out of the hard work. And we wrote that Bunk Bed Brothers play, again, having never written a play. And it was just a kooky kind of character study of two brothers. And he had lots of brothers, I had lots of brothers. And we were aggregating stories and ideas and tortures and so forth. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of the beginning of it. Now we had a play. So when it came time to submit to Castle Rock, where they had done the pilot already for Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. And Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld put out a call for submissions for material, and we didn't know any better. We submitted our play, and they liked it a lot, and it was chock full of jokes and all kinds of stuff. And Jerry vaguely knew of me as a stand-up because I worked at the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach and places like that. So we were the first two guys to get job offers, and it was Larry, Matt, and I. And we had a short order for 4 episodes, and it was completely speculative. They didn't know what they were going to do with it. It wasn't done by the regular primetime television people. There was a guy named Rick Ludwin there who's an executive, and he had money under, I think they called it late night and specials. Mm-hmm. So it would be like one-offs of, Circus of the Stars or Beat the Clock, or I don't know what kind of crazy things they were doing at that time. Uh-huh. So somehow he squirreled together the money from 4 specials to let us have this short order that was at that time called the Seinfeld Chronicles.
Right.
That was before it went on the air. And the changing of the name just happened to be that there was a show called The Martian Chronicles. Maybe it was a sci-fi thing that didn't get picked up. And suddenly they thought, oh, that's a poison word. We got to get rid of Chronicles, So that's how it got shortened to Seinfeld. I was there when they were creating the theme song, when we were naming the coffee shop. And it was an unbelievable time to be in television, but I had no business being there, as a writer, because I just hadn't done it. But I watched a lot of TV growing up, and my mom always said, that's never going to have any value. And I think it finally did. Right. It was like, I know how TV is structured. I know what's going on here. So I was not a schooled writer, but I did learn a lot on that show. And I subsequently wrote a few other, like I wrote Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman episode, and a show called Love and War. Yeah, after I was on Seinfeld. Uh-huh. Many people say I should have stayed there for the run of the show, but I really got to a point where I didn't want to be a mechanic in a shop, working on Jerry's Porsches, essentially. Like, I love the show. I love the characters. I just wanted to develop my own voice, and it may have been short-sighted at the time, but that was kind of when, I made a run at the American Pie thing.
Gotcha. Well, and for all purposes, you got it going. You put it all together. It was a done thing. I still think, again, that was a slam dunk, but, I'll
tell you what, I got really great advice from Jerry, because each week we would do an episode, we would cast it, we would do a table read, we would punch it up, we would prepare it for taping, and somewhere the nervous executives would say, we should just pull the plug on the show. We go, well, you already paid for it. Like, let us make this episode and see if it's better filmed. Like, the money is wasted. Let us shoot it. Yeah. Like every week we were afraid of being canceled and we weren't even on the air yet. Right. So I would call Jerry and I'd go, what do we do? And he'd go, make the best show, make the funniest show. You're the audience, entertain yourself, lose sleep over it. Nobody at NBC or any of these networks for that matter is going to stick around to fix it. He said, be the captain of your own ship. And if it goes down, you can do it proudly. If you board their ship and it goes down, you'll always regret it. Right. And that was those were the words that made us each week go, all right, let's come up with another kooky idea. Who cares? This is funny to us. All right, let's try it. So there's some pretty kooky stuff in there. The
freedom that you guys, from everything I've ever heard about it, and even when it started airing, wasn't received well and all of that kind of stuff. I'm assuming from what you're telling me here is just like that Jerry was kind of captaining that ship of just being like, screw it. Like, freedom. Well, let me say, if you've got nothing left, nothing to lose, why not,
Right. Well, Larry David was that voice.
Okay.
He wasn't even screw it. He would just say, do you want us to stop? Like he was very confrontational with the network.
Yeah.
Because, they'd go, could you cut out? No, we can't cut it out. How about if you give us an hour episode? Why don't we make it longer? Like he was very Larry. Like the Larry you see at Curb was the Larry I worked for. But Jerry was a guy who was expanding into an area. He was a stand-up. He was the classic stand-up. Mm-hmm. He had only a few experiences in television, and he hated it. He was cast on the show Benson as a speechwriter to the governor, and he was not a good actor. He'll admit that it was not his area.
Right.
He looked uncomfortable. And you know what he said after that? I'm never doing this. I'm not going to even try to do TV. I'm going to be a great stand-up. So this was quite a big leap for him. And essentially, he was Andy Griffith on the show. And, Kramer, everybody else was the crazy, Don Knotts part, right? So he had to kind of anchor that normal guy position, even though being a stand-up was kind of an unusual job for that time in television. So when it began, it used to have these interstitial stand-up sets that tied in. And I helped write those with him. But I think Larry was particularly frustrated. He's like, that's just taking away from the story. Like, let's get rid of that. We don't have to show him being a comedian. If he's a comedian, he's a comedian. Like, if a story takes us to the club, okay. But, so that fell by the wayside, and that gave more story room for these cross-hatching stories that Larry kind of really reinvented the form a little bit, because it used to be there was an A story and a B story, and, the B story wasn't as important. Well, he started making it where Kramer had a story and George had a story, and they were all weaved together. And by the end, they would pay off all off of the same closing moment or something, the golf ball in the whales, hole or whatever. And you'd go, what happened? Like, it was very, very interesting how that would come to be. And it amused them to no end to do that. So, being a witness to that was really fun.
Well, I mean, talk about what a school for you to be able to, did Larry, did he write for, TV a lot before Seinfeld?
He wrote on Saturday Night Live. He wrote on a show called Fridays. I think he only had, I want to say maybe a 1 year on Saturday Night Live. And he has a very famous story of getting so frustrated that he walks out. He quits at Saturday Night Live, I think on a Friday. And he leaves early and he goes, I'm never coming back. And then over the weekend, he freaks out. He's talking to his friend and he says, what do I do? He goes, go back. Just pretend it didn't happen. And he strolls in Monday and doesn't say anything and whatever. I mean, that eventually becomes a storyline that George does. Right. But that really happened to Larry. Many things, if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, whatever, these are all Larry's exaggerated version of what he really lived through. So,
right. And I heard a stint on Saturday Night. That's where he met Elaine, right? That's where he met Julie Louis-Dreyfus.
Elaine, Julie Louis-Dreyfus was there, and Brad Hall, who married her, was also on that cast that time. And I think that was a famously difficult season because they had lots of big stars had left, and it was, they grabbed new people and they brought them in, and then they had to work with some of the cast that stayed, who kind of were like, I would say there wasn't animosity, but it was like, who are you new people? You're not part of us. Like it just was a contentious season to kind of rebuild.
Yeah, I've heard
But
her
look
talk
at
about
Julia Louis-Dreyfus now. If you look at her, man, there isn't a bigger like female star in comedy for all the various series she's done and her amazing podcast now and whatever. Like she found her voice doing that show, and she's really, there was a phrase, the Seinfeld curse, where many of the other actors didn't get to do another series, and she did 4 of them.
Oh my God.
So
and all just gold. I mean, she's unbelievable. The series Veep, it's just, I've often said, I feel like it's the funniest thing that has ever been on TV. Just, yeah, that ensemble is insane. And I follow her. She's got a podcast, and she's just, I don't know. She's an awesome, she is. She is really, she's a force, a comedy force, but she's also super reflective. Very, very cool. That podcast that she does is awesome. You went on to, you toured with Jerry, did you not?
I did. No, I was an opening act somewhere. This all kind of commingles along the way, but he was pretty instrumental in getting me away, having me set down the magic props and the juggling props and stuff. Cause I was touring opening act.
Right.
And he said to me, just bring a garment bag, don't leave the top half, leave all that stuff at home. And you can come out and just try stand up and you won't lose your job. Right. And I was, I felt kind of liberated that he was giving me this, but I later found out that he just didn't want to wait at the baggage claim for my props, right? Like that was holding up. He's a very efficient guy, but it did light a fire under me. And I feel like at that moment, we kind of influenced each other a little bit, right? He really taught me about, it wasn't like we sat down. It was just like being in his presence. I wrote more every day. I observed more things. I paid attention to storytelling more. And then, but I was a very animated performer. Like I had a lot of energy and all of that. So, I was very playful, and it was a good thing to open for him and get his audience going. But, he's opened up over the years.
Yeah.
He's no longer just a button down comic, and,
he does a little physical stuff now.
Yeah. And over the years, I did go out on tour as a opener, and then I had a chance to write American Express commercials, kind of ghost wrote a bunch of kind of funny Jerry spots. Mm-hmm. It started out that the ad agency was writing them, and then they would send them to his guys to punch up, and we would go, the premise isn't very funny. Like, we can write jokes on top of this, but it's a little lame, So he convinced them to reverse that, which was we would write a funny spot, and then they would add the 18% revolving debt message or whatever, right?
Right.
And they didn't love everything we wrote, but that's the advertising process. I remember my favorite kind of campaign that never got to the air, which again is mainly the story of my life, is that nobody sees the stuff I write. But you remember back in the day, if you used a credit card at the store, they would drop it into this big metal plate and they would run a thing across. It was like schlick schlock, big sound, and it would imprint
just
carbon.
Manual. It wasn't electronic manual. Or anything.
Right. And everybody had to like kind of do that and, wear your card down. And it was hilarious to me, that particular machine. Mm-hmm. So I thought the American Express has a man in a metal helmet in the center of the picture. There's never any explanation about the centurion. Yeah. What if we make Jerry the man in the metal helmet? And then he could turn and say stuff and whatever. Like we'd show the card at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And, he'd go like, I'm the man in the metal helmet. I thought it was hilarious. And then you would show adventures of him coming, the card would come out of the purse and he'd go, no, not the machine, and then he'd say, that's why I wear the helmet, so I can go through the machine. Like I just sort of made up a life for that centurion.
Right.
Anyway, I wrote like 4 spots or 6 spots about that. And they were like, we're not doing it. Like, that's our brand. We're not making our ambassador into somebody whose helmet gets run through the machine. Anyway, it was the difference of
I could hear you wrote that with Jerry's voice. I could totally hear him. I could hear his voice. No. It's perfect for him.
And and the cash register is thinking, whatever. Right. But I think that, and I really did, there was not a moment of that wasn't glorious and delicious, but there was a point where I was writing my own material. And I wrote a routine about driving with your hands at 2 and 10 o'clock and something. And I was out headlining on the road, and it was a really funny routine, and I loved doing it. And then I was going down the escalator after the show behind some people, and they go, Yeah, I think he stole that material from Jerry. That sounds so much like Jerry, And I was like, oh, I got to stop writing this way, right? I have to write another way. And again, one was writing for him, but the other was observing the world in a similar way.
Sure.
And so anyway, it was good timing when I did, and I kind of worked in different arenas. So I worked in corporate, and I did other kind of warming up comedy shows and things like that. So I found my voice along the way.
So cut to now, and I won't keep any longer. We're way past your due date.
You mean right now at the end of the introduction we have to say goodbye?
Well, I could go on. We could cut this thing into 3 different episodes.
You made it sound like, let me get some of these facts out of the way first.
We could, like I said, I could talk to you all night, Pat.
I can tell you right now, we're fitting the title of your podcast, which
Making
is
No Sense.
Making No Sense. So this is a perfect episode of Making No Sense.
Well, I can. I'll take all the critique I can get. Trust me. So now cut to now. You're in Austin, Texas. What is? Are you working on just a grab bag of things, or is your head down working hard on the creativity and captivity, or what is it? I know you.
No, that is. Can I tell you that is a side hustle that's just for fun. It's great to have a podcast. It's really great to stay in touch with people. In the pandemic, I asked myself, what is my favorite thing to do? Mm-hmm. What kind of conversations do I like, whatever, and not even at all intending to have a podcast. I was just not performing. I wasn't directing, which I do a lot of commercial directing and stuff. I couldn't get people together for production, couldn't gather people to come see a show. Like, it was tough. So I thought, the thing I like doing most is developing material or creative consulting somebody who's doing a play or has a screenplay that needs to be punched up, wherever. It's the phone calls with those people where we laugh and have fun, and it's just really interesting and intriguing to me. And I thought I was inventing podcasting, because I was like, what if I could somehow record my phone calls with the guy of Pixar, or like, I was a moron. I was 15 years late to podcasting, but I was describing the essence of it, which was, intimate conversations that are like coffee shop conversations with highly creative people talking about why they do things, how they do things, what are they thinking about. And so it still gives me energy today, because I get to pick a new guest and I get to go, hey, I get to talk to Tom this week. What do I know about Tom? Not that much. Let me listen to some of his music. Let me go find out about his hair salon. Let me do, like, it gives me an assignment. And then I back away from the assignment and go, you know what? I'm going to watch that movie, or I'm going to read a few pages of that book.
Yeah.
And as we're doing here, the guest often knows their story. So you don't have to take everything in they have. But I'll tell you what, every guest I have, it's a curiosity date to learn something more about them, and then get the aha that I wish I'd have had earlier in my life if I had a mentor. So I'm proud that we have a library of over 250 episodes.
Wow.
That maybe they're not all for everybody, but if you want a specific thing, there's not that many people that are talking to the kinds of people that we're talking to, right? So, you can find out something, Lisa Loeb on songwriting, whatever, there's somebody that's doing something that you want. Mm-hmm. You get to hear them that you couldn't have that same conversation with them. So this is the handoff. It's like, if you're curious about it, I found the people that I least knew to be the most interesting.
Yeah.
Like Gary Staub is the guy who does the dinosaur sculpting, and he's outside of St. Joe, Missouri somewhere. I think it's Kearney, Kansas or something. And he's doing gigantic dinosaur sculptures for the Smithsonian and for these places. And, it's like, how do you get a job like that?
Yeah.
And then if you do, how do you pull it off? And then how do you move a dinosaur, to DC? He's got to cut it into 13 pieces, and he's got to get it through the man doors of the front door. Then he has to reassemble it. Then he has to spray it with dirt to make it look like it just came out of the mud. It's just insane what these people are doing for a living,
So are you doing all just audio for that?
Yes. And it was a choice initially because of the pandemic. I didn't want people to worry about hair and makeup. Mm-hmm. I didn't want people to worry about what their environment looked like, if they were in their living room or the basement or whatever. And also, it just felt more intimate. When somebody works with a camera on them, it's performative. Like if you watch The Tonight Show or something, they're often talking to the studio audience. They're not talking to the viewer at home, right? And in this case, we're talking to each other. So people are a little more forthcoming when they're talking to one person than when they're talking to some people where they think they might be judging their story and they want it to be the best it can be and that sort of thing. I just think there's a little more honesty in it. Yeah.
Speaking of which, and we won't get, I could talk to you all night. You were on how many Carson shows were you on?
Well, I only did one with Johnny.
Okay.
And 7 with Jay, 7 Tonight shows with Jay, which was fun. I mean, again, you learn to do a monologue. Everything that I write, usually there's a learning curve, right? If I write an NPR commentary, it's a little different than if you write a stand-up monologue where you're addressing an audience. Mm-hmm. If you're working in book form, if you're working in a screenplay form, there's a format. I wrote a musical with a guy from New York. I know nothing about musicals, and I had to look at the material and go, oh, wait a minute, there's got to be room for songs. And he goes, no, the songs are the story. The book is the lead in, and like the most important parts of this musical are going to be sung because the emotions are going to be at their highest when they want something. And it's like, oh, okay. So I learned about that and was like just amazed at what it takes. A musical is like a big undertaking. Yeah. And between the writing of the story and the inserting of the song, and then to make sure it makes sense, like it's fascinating to me, So it's not like I'm going to write a bunch of them, but I really do like the construction of original material.
Mm-hmm. And were your dates on with Leno and with Carson? You were doing strictly stand up, I take it, or were those in and around the show? So those were for the stand up.
I had stopped doing magic when I moved to LA, and that was a calculated choice. That if I was doing magic tricks, I was going to end up on a path like, David Copperfield or Doug Henning, where the tricks were going to be the star. And I felt like the storytelling and the laughs, I had a broader chance of getting, my material out there. And so I didn't cold turkey it, but I was really more selective about when I got to Los Angeles about, I worked occasionally at the Magic Castle, but it was kind of like I wanted to be seen as a stand-up. And so I did stand up with Johnny. And from that point, I was like, okay, I got to stay on this lane, and
what a thrill. And, what a thrill.
It was amazing. And, now all these years later, don't know, I couldn't even it was 1989. I did my Tonight Show debut or something. All these years later, now I work very tightly with Johnny's nephew, a guy named Jeff Sotzing, and I produce these salute shows like 100th anniversary of the Johnny Carson show and 100th anniversary to Carl Reiner. And, it's a very interesting thing to be known as a comedy producer that can pull the pieces together or that can edit short films or that can make get the cast to accept an invitation to those things. And boy, I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to be able to go into those Carson archives and look at the material that, my dad used to watch, and he'd call me into the room and he'd go, look at Buddy Hackett, look at how funny Buddy Hackett is, it's like a touchstone to that early sense of humor that my dad introduced me to.
They're hilarious. I mean, anytime I watch this, I feel like they still stand up too. I mean, like
they do
any of those clips.
There's all kinds of references that date themselves.
Yeah.
But when he does Karnak and he's got the turban on and he's doing that, they're still hilarious. And Johnny was a master of so many different things. So he could do sketches, he could do a monologue, he could interview. All of those different talents are rarely found in one person.
I used to write skits at prep for the home or for our pep rallies because of course we didn't have cheerleaders, and so we did skits. And I did a send up of a Karnak type of it was his bit. But I did it as Raul.
That's how you write it.
I did it with the sombrero as Raul Rodriguez, and but it was the same bit, and I did it. But it was those are some of my favorite bits that I did was those Karnak bits. But did you just real quick? Did you know Rick Corcoran by any chance?
Sure. Yeah.
Because we wrote some of those together at prep before he went out, and then was he on Seinfeld?
He did. He worked as I want to say initially an assistant editor and some other things, but yeah, he stayed at my house for a period of time while he was looking for, roommates and other things. But he was with a guy named Rick Salerno, another guy that I don't know. But anyway, they came out together and kind of had their run at it. And I think he got into sitcoms as maybe a writer's assistant and some other things. But, he came over to Seinfeld and, it was great. I think he's doing some good things now out there in LA, but
I completely lost touch with him. The last I heard was that he was doing some of that in Seinfeld days, but I haven't, completely lost touch with him. But we used to be good buddies back here. We went to grade school together, and then at St. Robert's, and then we went to prep together, and we used to do some of those skits together. he was
Yeah, and
always a funny guy.
I vaguely remember, I think he had a couple of other, he might have had another show before that he was a writer's assistant on. And, people always wonder, what are these job titles? What do these people do? And they vary, but they're all an important part of getting it done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even though a writer's assistant often is a runner going to pick up lunches or getting coffee or doing whatever, they're also the person that might transcribe your material off of a yellow pad and put it in the computer or what have you, right? Like they end up learning a lot about by being the person that is reading the material and delivering the material and the whatever. If they're paying attention, they can move on.
Well, if they're in those rooms, they're in those writing room. So what are you working on now, buddy? What do you think?
Well, I'm embarrassed to say because it's one of those things where if I say it, I have to do it. But I will say it because I'm trying to force myself to write a book. I've never written a book, and so this is a kind of a creativity, manual or something. And I'm not an expert and I'm not a know-it-all, but I've made a lot of mistakes and I've had a lot of conversations about it. And I felt like, this might be an area that I could share something with the world.
Yeah. Mistakes are the juice, man.
Yeah. But I think that it's not a narrative. It's not a story. It's it's the adventure of how to write a book from a guy while he's writing the book. Right. So I'm telling everything that I'm feeling, which I don't think a lot of people open up about the torture of it, but it might be, today I'm having a tough day. I don't know if I feel like writing, but I know I can get some things done. So maybe I'll go to the bank and I'll go to the dry cleaner. And like, you feel like I'm a multitasker. I'm really good at this. Right. And I just listed everything I did as I was writing that day. And I went, okay, you know what I didn't do today? I didn't write, but I wrote this. And 3 pages later, I have something, and you probably are familiar with doing this and going and sitting in the car line to be first for your kids and all that. Oh, yeah. You know what? You don't get extra points for that. Your kids don't care if you're 5th or 10th or across the street at the Walgreens. But you have now robbed yourself of another half hour of writing because you got to be up front there. You're like the perfect dad or mom, right? So it is interesting that the more I write about these things, I'm reflecting on, it's not really self-sabotaging. It's just a behavioral thing where you actually have to trick yourself into being your own boss, because nobody's looking after you when you're an entrepreneur and you're self-driven creative person. Like, you can go to the movies in the middle of the day if you want, right? But how do you feel if you don't do the thing, right? Like, that's why I say makers got to make. You got to make a thing, whether the audience is there, whether you're getting paid for it. All of it accumulates to being something cool. It's fun. You have stories to tell, whatever. But you kind of got to keep yourself in business,
No, I love the idea of the honesty of the process of putting the book together, of putting the podcast together. That's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast, because I wanted to be able to share with them the process of doing the podcast itself. In all fairness, Pat, I call Pat. Pat actually helped me figure out how the technical aspect of how to even put this thing on a podcast, on Zoom or whatever. I'm completely learning as I'm going, but I want to show that stuff, like, warts and all. And I'm putting together I've just started a company. We're going to do a shampoo. This is from my hairstyling life. And so we're doing a little shampoo company, and I wanted the podcast. I wanted to be able to have a place to where I could kind of talk about all of that, just the process that people never really, they kind of want to act like they've got it. Well, it's human nature. I've done it my whole. You want to come off like you've got it all together, and that and you show this finished product. But it's just like, but what? No. How did you get there? That's why I'm asking. Same thing I asked you about. How did you get that?
All right, I have something for you though. But I have something for you that will be very specific to you, right. And I just don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's on YouTube or not. But I wrote an episode of the Lois and Clark New Adventures of Superman with Terry Hatcher. Mm-hmm. And Terry was playing Lois all those years. And, we were neighbors at one point when I first moved out there. So she was familiar with my comedy trajectory and that I'd been writing on television and stuff. And she pitched the idea to ABC, and they said, you can only write it if you have a network approved writer join you in, to be sure that it works structurally and that, it gets delivered on time and, all of that kind of stuff. Anyway, her premise, which was very interesting, was that Lois and Clark Kent were going back to a high school reunion. And there was a wealthy woman that had a shampoo company. Like she had a hair products company that had become the star of she was like a super nude in high school, and she became the powerful entrepreneur with all the money. And she couldn't stand Lois because Lois always got the guys and Lois always, whatever. So this was like a tense reunion.
That's awesome.
And so she was our evil character. Okay. So when Terry was telling me about it, and the idea was kind of fun, kooky, they had already done a lot of Superman episodes. And I said to her, I would really like to do this if we didn't go after Superman. Everybody goes after Superman. They use kryptonite, they do whatever. And they think, oh, I get Superman, I take over the world. I go, if this hatred for Lois always getting the guy is that this woman goes after Clark and gets Clark, and by default gets Superman, it's much more interesting to me, right? So the idea that Terry had was that she diabolically has created a shampoo that when you use it, it shrinks you down, and then it makes them small. So then she could send her henchmen in to capture these people in nets and then take them back to her house, her lair, and have them living in her dollhouse of all the high school football guys she didn't like. Like she was capturing. Mm-hmm. It is a very, very silly premise. And I remember the network, when we went in to pitch it to ABC, they go, now we can't shrink people. We don't have the ability to shrink people. I go, what? People can fly. People can lift cars. We can shrink people, And they're like, well, we don't have the money for shrinking. I go, it's the same. Green screen, and I wasn't argumentative. I just said, how about this? Can we trade every flying and every lifting and every whatever, for a version of this? And I'll tell you how we can do this for less, we don't have to, we'll build a set that looks like a giant dollhouse,
right,
and the people can be full size and they'll look like they're in there. We don't have to intermingle that with the other. We can build a top of a dresser with a giant picture on it. And then Clark can be standing there trying to talk to Lois, and, he's full size, but we don't know it because there's nothing in context other than one giant picture that shows him little. Whatever.
Right.
Anyway, they ultimately they let us do it, and we had the quarterback Steve Young was the highlight of the 49ers at that time, and he came in and played the quarterback of the high school team that got shrunk down, and all of that, all based on the shampoo. I thought you might appreciate the special diabolical shampoo.
And that aired. You got the thing.
Yeah,
done?
It aired, and I have I have this teleplay, the script here, and that kind of thing. But I just don't. It may still be. I don't know where that show airs, but people put stuff up on YouTube all the time.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But it was called. It was Lois and Clark Do Adventures of Superman. The episode was called "It's a Small World After All."
Oh, of course.
Named after the Disney thing, but it was about Lois discovering that all her friends were being shrunk down and held hostage.
That's a riot.
It is so dumb, but it was really fun.
Well, well, it gives me some ideas, but I don't know about the shrinking thing. So, but
all right. Well, I'm just saying they can do lots of different things. They can make people that are looking. They can make people, shampoo, beard shampoo, whatever.
Well, I won't bore you with our pitch on that, but I appreciate that, and maybe there's something there I could use on that. I love that entered the Superman realm, is that shampoo. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Pat, my man, again, I could talk to you all night, but I won't do it. I'll let you go for the night. I so appreciate that. Just so the audience knows, the only reason Pat's doing this is for one reason only, and that's purely because he's a good guy. And that's it.
And I need a bottle of that shampoo.
And I'll get you some shampoo. I can assure you. But it won't shrink you. Don't worry.
I don't need drinking now.
Okay. But you'll be all right. Pat, buddy, I so thank you. We'll tune in and make sure we'll follow you on the Creativity and Captivity and everything else that you're doing. I'm telling you, YouTube channel, Pat, just flood that thing with all this good stuff so that we could remember it and hold on to it.
Thank you for that. Anyway, always a pleasure to talk with you. I've been a fan of your music and your family for a long time, and I just appreciate the invitation.
Well, thanks a lot. And when you're in town, definitely come and see us. Look us up.
Now, give me your opinion about this haircut? I'm kidding.
All right. You're all right. I'm off the clock. So no.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Pat. Thanks so much, buddy. I will talk to you soon. All right. Thank you.
Making no sense with Tom